Hi there, smart driver. Social driving, the leading cause of car crashes, not just in the United States, but also in Europe and other high-income countries in the world. And I am tying this into what we were talking about last week with the number of traffic crashes in the United States of America. And if you compare it to every other high-income country in the world, the number of traffic crashes in the United States of America is consistently higher than it is in other high-income countries in the world. Canada, all the continental Europe countries, Germany, Spain, France. And why is that? And as I said, you can't point at any single factor and say this is why, okay? It's a combination of factors, and we've talked about those. I talked about those last week, and as I said, I'll put a card up in the corner. Have a look at that video as well to get kind of a general overview of the traffic safety issue in the United States of America. Today we're talking about social driving. We're talking about driver behavior. We're talking about attitudes towards driving and the personalized space of being in your own vehicle. And the fundamental tenet of social driving is that I am a good driver. It's everyone else that needs to change. And, I'm not leveling an accusation at other people because I've been driving since I was 12 years old. I worked on a farm. I drove old cars, tractors, those types of things. I drove trucks, I drove buses, and now I hate to say it, but I'm in my late 50s. And so I have been driving for more than 40 years. I too am guilty of I am a good driver. It's everybody else on the roadway that changes. But I'm also modest enough to admit that I make mistakes. We all make mistakes when we're driving. But what habits have we created? What driving styles have we created that mitigate that risk? As I talk about 2 to 3 second following distance, stopping back in traffic 1 vehicle length, signaling every time you change directions of the vehicle, shoulder checking, always be scanning, mapping intersections, tracking road users so that you can interpret traffic patterns and predict the actions of individual road users. If you can put those driving habits and skills and techniques in place, they're going to mitigate risk and they're going to protect you when you make mistakes, when you get tired, when you're driving distracted. This is what you need to do to reduce your chances of being involved in a crash. And this is what I talked about at the end of the video last week, is what you can do to reduce your chances of being involved in a crash and improve your driving and significantly reduce your risk of being involved in a crash. So those are the things that you can do. Those are the driving habits and techniques that you can put in place and develop and do them every time so that you have those habits that are going to protect you. Since videos to have a look at: 5 defensive driving skills, habits and skills, and defensive driving for brand new drivers who just got their license. What skills and abilities do you need to put in place? You're probably going to get into trouble making left-hand turns. So definitely look at those videos to create habits and skills and techniques that are going to reduce your chances of being involved in a crash. Social driving is the one thing that unites us as a human race, regardless of creed, politics, religion, beliefs. Almost everybody who drives a car would say, I am a good driver. And it was interesting talking to my friend Bill Walker, who I did some videos with 10 years ago. He was my poster student from truck driving school, got his license on Thursday. He has class 1 CDL license on Thursday. On the next Tuesday, he was working in the oil fields driving trucks that weighed 140,000 pounds, which is kind of crazy to think that somebody that had almost zero experience was driving that kind of truck. But I had a conversation with him a few months back, and he was talking about how driving happens in Mexico because he's retired in New Mexico now with his wife, and very, very different driving culture and attitudes towards driving in Mexico in terms of where traffic signs are, for example, where stop signs are. They're not even at the intersection as you would think of in North America, that they're there at the corner. He said they could pretty much be anywhere at the intersection. So you really have to look around in terms of where traffic signs are. But most people, almost everybody who drives, would agree with the statement, I am a good driver. Drivers who participate in the arena of social driving, which I would argue is probably about 93, 94% of drivers on our roadways, They follow too close, they stop too close in traffic, and they travel too close to vulnerable road users. And this is definitely one of the mistakes that brand new drivers make, is they get way too close to kids on bicycles, pedestrians, those types of things, and you really have to impress upon them that it is dangerous to be closer than 1 meter, 3 feet from vulnerable road users on the roadway. And we just don't have the number of pedestrians here in North America that they do in Europe and other places. And in addition to that, and I've talked about this previously, lane splitting with scooters, motorcycles. Lane splitting is allowed in Europe. It's allowed in California, but it's not allowed in other places in the world. And every time you bring up lane splitting for any other state in the US outside of California or here in Canada, somebody who generally doesn't have a great deal of information about traffic will post some person on a big fully dressed Harley Davidson trying to lane split, and they're bouncing off the cars because it's just the motorcycle is too big. That's not the way that motorcycles are in Europe. Most of the time, the biggest motorcycle you're going to get in Europe is probably a racing bike, but most of them are Vespas and scooters and those types of things. And lane splitting, as far as I'm concerned, makes them more visible and puts them into the consciousness of drivers. And I think that we should have it here as well in North America and whatnot. But again, it comes back to common sense. And as we know, common sense, unfortunately, isn't so common. So if you allowed lane splitting in North America, you will get those people on big Harley Davidsons, Honda Goldwings and interstates and those big touring bikes trying to lane split. And it's absolutely ridiculous to think that you can do that. Reactionary and retaliatory. Most people who are within the realm of social driving are reactionary. They're retaliatory. Somebody does something goofy, they cut them off, they merge in front of them, they signal to move over, and they're like, and they're raising their fists and they're cussing them out, and then they will tailgate them to get back at them. And in many instances, the person in front of them didn't even know that they cut them off. They didn't know that they made a mistake. All right, Get-There-Itis. This has been a problem in transportation for a very long time, and it is the reason that the Titanic sank, one of the most famous shipwrecks in history. Sank on the 14th of April, 1912. Mayday, Mayday, if you watch that television series of plane crashes and running red lights, speeding, aggressive driving, what is Get-There-Itis? We need to get from point A to point B as quickly as humanly possible. And it's been interesting, and I know that Ryan Trans doesn't need any help from me. He's a YouTuber. He has 22 million followers. We've been watching the 50 States in 50 Days series, and, it's hilarious because they're in the western states, Wisconsin, Iowa, the Dakotas, and Montana, and they're driving. They're like, oh, we got a gauntlet today. We got to drive 8 hours. And for somebody like me who used to drive truck over the road and traveled with my kids where I'm the only driver. We drove from Sydney Airport after getting off of an international flight and drove to Wangaratta. You can say that, Wangaratta. It was like 8.5 hours. And they're like, oh my God, it's 8.5 hours. We got to drive so far. And there's like 2 of them driving. It's like, no. You guys are amateurs. But Get-There-Itis, you got to get from point A to point B as quickly as humanly possible. And there's all kinds of memes on social media where, Google says that the time is going to be 4 hours and 38 minutes. And it's like dad showing up in 4 hours and 15 minutes and beating Google, right? And they think that they're a Formula One driver. This is why. And it's going back to the sinking of the Titanic sank because ship captains during this period of time were under immense pressure to make the crossing from England to North America, the United States, and New York City in record time. And this is what happened to the Titanic, is that it was under enormous pressure as the unsinkable ship to make the crossing in record time, and the captain did not slow down when going through the ice fields, the glacier ice fields in the North Atlantic. Driving nose to tail, the way that we communicate, there is some theory about this in terms of poor communication between vehicles, but experienced drivers will look at some of the details and minutiae about driving and be able to understand traffic patterns, read and interpret and predict the actions of individual road users. So when traffic goes slower, vehicles are even closer. So this is another indicator when traffic is slowing down, the spaces between the vehicles get smaller. It's not just the brake lights. So you can be looking at the traffic overall and figuring out what's going to happen. And because you're maintaining your 2 to 3 second following distance, Instead of reacting and hoping that you can react in time, you're going to respond to what's going on in the driving environment. Too close in queues, getting rear-ended, managing space in front, misperceptions. People think, and people have come back, smart drivers over the years have said to me, if I maintain space in front, people are going to cut in. Every now and again, people are going to cut in, but for the most part, people are not going to cut in. They're not going to take that space. And I have been driving like this for years, and I've driven all over the world. I've driven in Europe, in Spain, I've driven in Australia, I've driven in the United States of America, here in Canada. The smarter defensive driving model works, keeping that 2 to 3 second following distance in front. Yes, you have to push. Sometimes you have to go on red lights, but it's like driving in snowstorms. How often in your life do you drive in snowstorms? You have to turn left on a red light. How often in life is traffic so congested that you can't keep space in front of your vehicle? Very seldom. The last time I drove in a snowstorm was probably 6 or 7 years ago in the mountains on the Coquihalla. That was the last time I drove in a snowstorm. Okay, drivers fail to communicate. Unpredictable actions are erratic and without warning. People don't signal. And you want to talk about something controversial? Just ask on my channel, my YouTube channel, on the community tab, when do you have to signal when driving? And I will say to people that you have to signal every time you change directions of the vehicle, going forward and in reverse. And I will tell you right now that if you don't do this on a driver's test, you will be assigned demerits. You have to signal in the direction that you're moving the vehicle, whether you're going forward or whether you're going backwards. And if you put that question up on the community tab, we'll come back to you and say, there are all kinds of places that you don't have to signal. I disagree. Just teach people that every time you change directions of the vehicle, you signal, and you create that habit, you're going to significantly reduce your chances of being involved in a crash on the roadway. So, unpredictable actions. When you're being unpredictable on the roadway, you're significantly increasing your chances of being involved in a crash. Emotional drivers. If I say one thing about driving is emotional. People get upset. And when they're upset, they are not thinking logically. They're not putting in place the skills, techniques, and habits that are going to keep them safe. Drivers police and criticize other drivers, and they communicate with other drivers by crowding them. In other words, they're following too close, they're honking, they're giving them the finger, and they're displaying signs of road rage. This is all part and parcel of social driving, and drivers being emotional, drivers being reactionary and retaliatory. They're going to get back at you for something that they think you did, a slight in their world. Reasons for crashes. Number one, following too close. And we'll talk more about this next week, because every traffic safety organization says that it is speed that causes crashes. And maybe you can help me with this as a smart driver, it's not speed. Speeding contributes to the severity of the crash and definitely contributes to the number of fatalities, but it is not the cause of the crash. And I'm still trying to kind of figure this out, and we'll talk a little bit more about this after the presentation, but I'm trying to figure out how it is that speed, it's the very reason that we drive. We drive because we get somewhere faster and it's convenient, but it's also the convenience of driving, but it's also the downfall of driving, because the faster you go, and if you do get into a crash, the more likely the crash is to be fatal. So it's somewhat of a conundrum, and it's something that's eluding me in terms of what is speed really in terms of driving. And, too many people say, oh, speeding is the cause of crashes. There's something else going on there. Speed is just the byproduct. So we can talk about that. Failing to give way. As I said, oftentimes when there's a hazard or dangerous situation, you just take your foot off the accelerator for a little bit, let the person go and have their crash somewhere else. Mismanagement of speed and space. People are texting, people are drunk, they're inebriated, they've been smoking marijuana, they're tired, they're fatigued, they're driving at night. As we know, half of fatal crashes occur at night on two-lane roads. Single vehicle crashes, they're not two vehicles running into each other. Single vehicle crashes, the person drives off the road, rolls the vehicle, and you have a fatal crash as a result of that happening. So there's many criteria and conditions that happen that cause the crash. But if people are driving too fast, it increases the severity of the crash, because as we know, the energy in the vehicle increases exponentially. Good luck on your driver's test, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Epic, my friend, in North America isn't the norm. After the driving test, drive with the flow of traffic. Another thing of social driving. What do you think of this purposely ignoring Painted Island's post road test? It's another signpost of social driving, my friend Epic. And flow of traffic, it's one of the gray areas of driving. I always keep up with traffic flow when I'm driving because it makes me more predictable on the roadway, and I'm not going too slow or too fast within that social activity when I'm driving on the roadways. But again, I don't have all the answers. I know how to be predictable on the roadway and reduce my chances of being involved in a crash. Keeping up with traffic flow, I do encourage drivers to stay with traffic flow after they get their driver's license. You can't do it when you go for a driver's license because you have to drive the posted speed limit. Unfortunately, if any smart driver has driven the posted speed limit, you're finding that people are passing you all the time and there's a big line of vehicles behind you because you're the slowest vehicle on the roadway. 100% agree, respacing versus idiotic rhetoric about speed, absolutely nonsense. See Germany if speed is so evil. Yes, absolutely. In terms of Germany, I refer to the Autobahn again and again in terms of speed. Speed is the very reason that we drive cars, so that we can get to our destination as quickly as possible. There's a certain convenience that goes along with driving cars, but at one and the same time, it's not speed that causes the car crash. Okay, it contributes to the severity of the crash. It's not speed. And as we talked about last week, if you talk about that in terms of, why traffic crashes are so high in the United States, there's many, many, many contributing factors. And one of the biggest myths in terms of traffic safety, and this goes back to one of the things that safety pundits are saying about narrow roads reduce the number of crashes. And Europe was a country. Europe is a place that did not grow up with the motor car. They already had a well-established road network in place before the motor car came along. So they have smaller cars and narrower roads with a great deal more parking and crowding within their cities. And people drive slower because it's narrower spaces. It's not like wide open spaces in the United States because the United States grew up with the motor car. Go to Los Angeles. You'll see a city that grew up with the motor car and built its roads accordingly with that need. Does this contribute to a higher number of traffic crashes? I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Epic. Another thing in North America, since states and municipalities set their own traffic rules, sadly, in the case of New York City, New Jersey, drivers tend to turn right on red at a complete disregard of the rules. Yes, they do, because it's that fundamental tension between traffic safety rules and traffic flow. How much volume of traffic can we move through a section of roadway per hour and still keep everybody happy when all of that is happening? Klaus, the speed of the car isn't the problem. It's the stop to zero and the physics in the crash that will get the driver. What I discovered over the years, an overlap crash is often deadly. Yes, it is. And it's exactly what Klaus just said in terms of, falling off a tall building. It's not the height that kills you. It's that sudden stop at the bottom. It's the same thing with a car crash. It's the sudden deceleration that causes injuries and death in a car crash. It's the same thing as heights. It's not the height that's going to hurt you. It's the sudden stop at the bottom. It's not the fall that's going to hurt you. It's the sudden stop at the bottom. That's what gets you. So, smart drivers, I implore you, help me to figure out and how to articulate speed is not the cause of car crashes. It contributes to the severity and the number of fatalities that we experience on our roadways, especially in North America, but it is not the cause of car crashes. So, if you can help me with one thing, help me to articulate what speed is. That would be tremendously, tremendously appreciated. Thank you so much for the live stream. Social driving. Put your driving habits in place. 3 to 4 second following distance, stopping back in traffic, 1 vehicle length, signal and shoulder checking every time you change direction of the vehicle, mapping intersections, tracking road users, and interpreting traffic patterns and predicting the actions of individual road users. All of that will reduce your chances of being involved in a crash. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great night. Bye now.